we are starting to see some of the playbook the White House is planning to use for the midterms when it comes to undermining elections again. California held its primary, and everyone from Elon Musk to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, to the president have been saying something is very rotten in the Golden State, specifically in Los Angeles. None of it with any actual evidence. In fact, they've admitted to that. Now, when Trump was pressed on it this weekend, he stormed out of the interview with NBC, but I'm going to spend some time today explaining why you should be ready for what we are about to hear for November. None of it is new, but all of it works to muddy the waters. Consider it Trump playing the hits of election denial. And then before I wrap up today, Trump took a trip to the NBA Finals game in New York where he got booed and might have fallen asleep, but if you ask him, the reception was so good they practically asked him to join the team. It's Tuesday, June 9th, 2026. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Hermes. Last week, the state of California held its primary election. That included governor, members of Congress, and crucially for what we're talking about, mayor of Los Angeles. If you don't live in LA or you haven't been tuned into this at all, that's understandable. If you don't live there, certainly. It's between current LA Mayor Karen Bass, Nithya Raman, and Republican Nepo baby reality TV star Spencer Pratt. Now, you can do a deep dive into Pratt if you want. That's really what I want to do here, but there is a lot there, from allegations that he beat his own sister so badly he sent her to the hospital. He got her hooked on hard drugs when they were teens, and allegations that he joined a crystal healing cult for up to 8 years, while also amassing a $1 million collection of crystals before his home in the Palisades burned down in the Los Angeles fires last year. And that's the part that you actually should know, is Pratt's big claim in this race. The reason he got into it is that he says he's been living out of an Airstream trailer on the lot of his old house since that fire, which isn't true. He and his family have been living in various hotels around LA, frequently the Bel Air Hotel Penthouse. Now, regardless, he's a high-profile Republican running in Los Angeles against two women of color, including a sitting mayor whom the president has attacked personally on multiple occasions, which makes all of this red meat for the far right and the president. Now, California has moved to an all-absentee or mail-in voting system. Absentee and mail-in mean the same thing. I'm going to use them interchangeably here. But people can and still do go vote in person, and they did. And it took about 6 days for votes to get completely counted. In those 6 days, though, far-right activists and election officials were all over the place, saying California's slow count process is a sign of massive fraud. Elon Musk specifically pointed to changes in voters for Raymond, who was sitting in third place and eventually overtook Pratt, who was in second. In California, the top two vote-getters in any election move on to the general election, regardless of party. Musk and others claimed this was evidence of some sort of fraud conspiracy. It's not. A Trump-appointed U.S. attorney investigated these claims and within 12 hours did not find any fraud. They said so publicly, but at that point, the train on this thing had left the station. Here's the thing. It is not uncommon to see these surges and dips as ballots from different precincts get processed in major elections. Different pockets of voters will mean jumps in vote totals. Second, LA County is a majority Democratic county, and the city of Los Angeles has more Democratic voters compared to Republicans, almost 3-1. So it's not surprising at all that a Republican wouldn't make the cut for the mayor of LA, even the runoff. Third, and this is where the real playbook that I talked about at the beginning comes in here, Republicans are much less likely to support the idea of voting by mail and are more likely to vote in person. A study from the bipartisan States United Democracy Center found that while only a quarter of Republicans said they plan to vote by mail in 2024, 40% of Democrats said they plan to. And that split comes from the fact that for the last 7 years, the president has spent a lot of time saying absentee voting is full of fraud, despite the fact that he does it himself. What it actually means, though, is that absentee ballots in states like California are processed before Election Day, meaning they're opened, sorted into the right precinct, locked up again with chain of custody and tamper evidence seals on them. And since they're ready to go, they often are left to the end of the night or for when there's some downtime in processing votes that came in on Election Day itself. And if you want to know how your state does this, that is what this week's Things You Forgot from Civics class is all about, how your vote gets counted. Subscribe, read it, share it around. This is the kind of thing that we need out there right now to combat this nonsense about elections that happens every 2 years. Anyway, what you have in a state like California then is a lot of mail-in ballots in a city like LA, where most of those ballots are likely to be in favor of a Democratic candidate, both because of general political demographics and also trust in absentee voting. Then when they get processed, it looks like this big surge. It's not, though. It's not nefarious. It's just math. But it also takes a long time for California to count these ballots because processing time for absentee ballots takes longer, even if clerks have been trying to process them ahead of time. California law lets election officials process early ballots or mail-in ballots 29 days before an election, but still, think about it. How long does it take you to open a single envelope? All the time it would take a clerk here to open an envelope, match that signature and or verify voters' information, then open the security envelope inside the original envelope, take the ballot out, sort that ballot into the right precinct, and then it gets counted. Now times that by several hundreds of thousands, if not millions of times across the state or even a clerk's office. That takes so much time. And so what California, the country's most populous state, runs into is what election nerds like me affectionately call a pig in a python problem. There is just too much stuff to get through a very narrow, very strict process, and the time it takes is how long it takes. That's not evidence of fraud in California, and officials there have been trying to make this process run better for years. It's just a lot of votes. But that isn't stopping people like the president who are hoping to use this counting time to say that fraud is happening. And that's how we get to the president's interview this weekend on NBC's Meet the Press. And full disclosure here, I did run some of this through a noise canceller to clean up the background noise from the rain. They did this in what looked like a sheet metal barn in Wisconsin. The president was holding a rally there. And some of this is edited if you're just listening to this, so you're not listening to an 8-minute long clip, but it's not really edited all that much.
Todd Blanche. Listen to me. Let's talk. There's tremendous evidence. There's nothing but evidence. The election was rigged. It was a dirty election, and it's happening again right now in California. It's happening right now in California. Right now, it's look at what's happening in California. It's 4 days.
Doing well
in California. They're not. They're dropping fast because it's a rigged election. Let me tell you, it's 4 days. And they aren't even close to coming up.
That's how they count.
You know why they're doing that? Because they're cheating on the election press.
But Mr. President,
you know why I got that? Because you have no credibility.
But you've never presented evidence that it was rigged. Let's keep talking about. I want to talk about Todd.
You have more evidence. There's more evidence than ever presented.
Let's talk.
Your elections in this country, we're like a third world country. Your elections are crooked, and you're crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked, and so is ABC and CBS. And CNN.
But Mr. President,
you're one-sided crooked network. So let's call it quits because I've had enough. Thank you, darling. Have a good time.
Mr. President, let's please. I traveled all the way to Wisconsin.
I've sat in the rain with you.
I know.
I traveled all the way for an hour, on and off in the rain, and I've given you enough time. You ought to straighten out your press because you know what?
Mr. President,
a country can never be great with a dishonest press.
Listen, we traveled all the way to Wisconsin for this election.
Okay, so I know that's a lot there, but the host of Meet the Press, journalist Kristen Welker, is right. Trump has never presented any actual evidence that held up in any court of law or really held up to any of the slightest bit of scrutiny in almost any case where Trump's attorneys in the 2020 election presented what they thought was evidence of fraud. It turned out to be entirely made up, or was what someone believed was fraud, but it was just really them not understanding the process of how elections are run. And if what you're looking for is fraud in a process you don't understand, you're just going to see fraud everywhere. Welker is also one of the best journalists at what she does on TV anywhere right now, and certainly she doesn't deserve to be treated that way by the president. And I'm glad that she didn't just sit there and take it. And I wish that more journalists would push back when the president attacks them personally, like he did last week to Kaitlan Collins. But at the end of this here, that is the President of the United States refusing to answer basic questions about what is now a fundamental belief to his entire political movement and party. And instead of defending those beliefs, he lashed out and then ran away, crushing the microphone under his foot on the way out. You heard that, actually. Although running, I guess, here is a strong term for sort of the shuffle that took place, but I'll come to that a little later. Because on Monday, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson was asked about what Trump said, and here's how he responded.
24 to
You're
40
saying it's rigged like the president?
I'm not saying it's rigged. I'm saying it stinks to high heaven, and everybody knows that. Let's remove the appearance of impropriety. Let's have what a concept. Let's have votes on an election the day of the election. That's what many states are able to do. I think California is playing around with this.
But what evidence is there to prove that this is rigged?
Look, some of these efforts are so diabolical and so far upstream it is impossible to prove. But I think everybody knows instinctively something is wrong here.
It can't be proven, but it has to be believed. What are we talking about here? The thing about this argument from Donald Trump and Johnson and all these other conspiracy theorists is that if, like Johnson said, that these efforts go all the way to the top and they are so diabolical and unstoppable, how is it that Mike Johnson is Speaker right now? Or that Trump won in 2024? Or that Republicans won seats from Democrats in California in 2024 up and down the ballot? The truth of the matter is, counting votes accurately and safely takes time in a state the size of California. In fact, when Johnson says we should have election results on election night, he knows that no state does that because no state certifies its election on election night. Those vote totals we see are unofficial. Ballots have to be double-checked, sometimes fixed by voters in a process called curing when information doesn't line up. State and local election boards then have to sign off on those vote counts, and then they're made official. I mean, in presidential elections, Congress has to certify those votes. It's why Trump supporters attacked the Capitol on January 6th, not November 6th. But none of that matters, because the point of this isn't really that they think something is wrong with the election, though maybe the president does because he's unable to process a defeat. But what this is about is making people feel unsure about the results of their election or their vote, so that they can find excuses to hold on to power and to rile up their base to potentially violent ends. Trump did it in 2020 and 2021, and Republicans have been doing it ever since, and now we're seeing it again because it works for them. And if it ain't broke, I guess don't fix it. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, more questions about the president's health as he takes to Madison Square Garden for the NBA Finals. I want to talk to you about sleep, because if you've been following this show, you know the news cycle has been absolutely unhinged. And if the news cycle isn't going to be good to you, your sleep cycle should be. And that starts with the right fabric. And it's why this episode is brought to you by Cozy Earth. Here's the thing. Summer is here and it is hot. You're already lying awake at 2 a.m. thinking about the headlines, your deadlines, that weird thing you said at work. The last thing you need is to also be sweating through your sheets like you're having a fever dream. That is where Cozy Earth comes in. Bamboo sheets are legitimately temperature regulating, meaning they keep you cool when it's hot and warm when it's not. I know that sounds like marketing speak, but it is just how bamboo works. It breathes. Your polyester blend from 5 years ago, it does not breathe. It traps heat. It is not your friend. They also have bamboo pajamas, which make you wonder why you ever wore anything else to bed. And when I wake up, I put on their new brushed bamboo joggers that are soft in a way that feels almost unfair to the rest of my clothes. Look, the world is a lot right now, and you deserve one thing, at least, that just works. Cozy Earth is that thing. You can go to CozyEarth.com and use the code MIMS25 at checkout for 30% off. And just a heads up, when you use the code, Make It Make Sense gets a cut of that sale, which helps this show keep going. So you're sleeping better and you're supporting independent journalism, which is, what I call a win-win. Again, the code is MIMS25 at CozyEarth.com. All right, let's get back to the show. So I know that I said I was going to talk about the president in Madison Square Garden. I'm going to do that, but as I'm recording here, we got some breaking news that the president has confirmed that Iran has shot down an American helicopter, or at least did. The pilots of that were rescued, and he is now vowing some kind of retaliation. I have no idea what this means for the ceasefire, not ceasefire we have been in for the past 2 months or so, but that is happening as I'm recording. Just know that I'm not ignoring that. I just don't have any details right now. All right, let's move on now. During that interview on Meet the Press, there were a few things about Trump physically that were hard to not notice. First, his right hand is still swollen. The makeup's still there, but it's swollen. The swelling under his eye has gone down, though. He was a much deeper shade of this spray tan he uses than we've seen in recent weeks, where he's tended to look a little more pale, a little more sallow. The swelling in his ankles looks like it is moving up his leg now. And then there was how Trump stood up. And for watchers, I'm going to play this for you. So he has to reposition himself in the chair to widen his stance, push himself up, and then he's unsteady. And at one point, he reaches out to Welker, which looks like he's patting her on the shoulder at first, but he's doing it because he kind of wobbles out of this chair. And yeah, it looks like he's ducking under a light. He's tall, but no respectable news crew would place a light so close that Trump would stand and hit his head. That's just not how they would do this. It would be actually too bright in the shot itself. I've been in those rooms. I've done those interviews. It's not how this works. Now, these two were in Wisconsin for what was billed as a rally for Trump, but instead, it turned into this seated round table, and I realized that Trump has rarely done standing rallies lately. Certainly not for the marathon rallies he was holding even during the 2024 campaign, but definitely not like 2020 or 2016. All of his Oval Office press conferences are now behind the Resolute desk, seated. When he was required to stand for a semi-extended period of time recently during the service at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier on Memorial Day, he couldn't stand straight. He was very unsteady on his feet, just standing. And I'm very curious about what headlining this rally to kick off the Great American State Fair on the National Mall he's supposed to be doing is going to look like. If he's going to stand for it, if so, how long? Or if he's going to send in a pre-taped speech from the Oval Office like he did from the rededication Christian prayer event of the National Mall a few weeks ago. That's totally in the realm of possibility. And then all of that brings us to last night, where Trump went to Game 3 of the NBA Finals, his New York Knicks against the San Antonio Spurs. The game was in New York at Madison Square Garden, which Trump wants to redo portions of to put his name and presidential seal on. When they showed him on the screen, this is what happened. Those are boos. Loud ones. And when Trump was asked about his reception, he said this.
Great. I mean, I thought it was amazing, actually. You mean when they had the camera on me? I thought it was very good, yeah. It was certainly amazing. It was. I think, mostly cheers. It was loud and it was very enthusiastic.
Like I said before, I know Trump can't acknowledge a loss or a bad thing or whatever, but man, that is just not what happened here. And then a little later during the game, Trump appeared to nod off during an NBA final game in an arena where the decibel meter routinely tops 90. That's like sleeping next to somebody starting up a Harley. In the stills of those moments where his eyes are closed, you can see more drooping on the right side of his face, which, like I've reported before, is a key sign of a stroke-like event according to the American Stroke Association. So once again, we've got the president, at the very least, unable to keep his eyes open when he should be awake, let alone inside an NBA arena, showing symptoms of a medical event as explained by medical professionals after a pattern of balance issues, arm weakness, and speech problems, all of which I've talked about before, or I've had experts on the show talk about before, and repeated cognitive testing. I know that pointing out this stuff isn't going to matter to the White House or to the Republican Party, at least not yet, and certainly not his most diehard supporters. But I do think it's important to keep pointing these things out so that there's a record of them, because he's still the commander-in-chief while we are at war, potentially, as of today, a newly escalating one. And he's the president of the United States with full control of Congress and the Senate for at least the next few months, with clear aims to dust off the playbook to undermine the election again. All right, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. Like and subscribe if you're a watcher on YouTube. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack so you can get this week's Things You Forgot from civics class. You can read it and share it around with your friends so they can all learn how elections actually work in their states, and hopefully we can push back on some of this nonsense a little bit. And as always, share the show on social media. You can tag me at Grant Hermes on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.